This is an RNZ podcast.
Now, what's New Zealand's favourite dinner routine? We've all got our go-to, but now food guru Nadia Lim is shedding some light on it.
We've partnered with My Food Bag to reveal some of the insights.
That was Hilary Barry and Jeremy Wells on TVNZ's 7 Sharp show earlier this month with what sounded like fairly typical lifestyle type stuff that you get on that show. In this case, dinner time food favourites with a media-friendly food guru. And there was also some good news for TVNZ's 7 PM news show itself as well.
The average dinner time was between 6 and 6:30, so I guess just in time to watch 7 Sharp.
Perfect.
Now, this rehashing of My Food Bag's consumer research wasn't really news. As we heard at the start there, Hilary Barry said that 7 Sharp partnered with the meal kit company to put that in the show in the first place. And on the screen, 7 Sharp viewers with sharp eyes would have seen a "brought to you by My Food Bag" message, showing that this was really quite a long advert during the programme. And after Nadia Lim cooked up some chicken, rice and salad on 7 Sharp, they drove home the commercial message.
Now, lovely to see you. What is it about these meals that makes them so popular?
I think it's the fact that now we've literally got something to suit everyone. So I don't know if you remember My Food Bag back in the day where we had like set bags with set recipes, but these days we've got over 30 plus recipes.
Now, there's nothing new about TV shows brought to you by the sponsors. 5 years ago, TVNZ ran an entire series about money commissioned by KiwiBank.
At KiwiBank, it's our mission to make Kiwis better off.
That's why we teamed up with Nigel Latter to make Mind Over Money.
And soon after that, TVNZ aired an entire primetime series about Qantas.
It's a proud Australian with a safety record second to none.
Just 1 second. What's going on, Jeffrey?
Medical emergency on that one.
With exclusive behind-the-scenes access.
But no one told the viewers back then that what was billed as a fly-on-the-wall documentary was actually made for and paid for by Qantas. There's also nothing new about news and current affairs shows being a vehicle for commercial sponsors, and these days TVNZ's 7 Sharp tells viewers right at the start of the show it's made in partnership with ASB Bank. But usually the commercial messaging isn't actually hosted in the show itself, with the hosts puffing up the product, as they did for Nadia Lim on 7 Sharp recently. Now, in the business, this is called native advertising, while the media companies themselves prefer the more innocuous-sounding term, integrations. And last week, that instance of it on 7 Sharp grabbed the attention of the former chief editor at NZME, Shane Curry, who's now an editor-at-large writing about the media each week in the New Zealand Herald. Now, he said that all commercial media organisations these days work closely with clients and advertisers, but they must ensure that the newsrooms maintain editorial independence from them, and
we need to tell our audiences when a sponsor or advertiser has come on board for editorial projects or associated content.
Quite so. And 2 years ago, Shane Curry had to put right an instance of this going wrong at NZME when its rivals at Stuff revealed that the property platform One Roof had hosted a series of articles for the Crown housing agency Kāinga Ora, which paid NZME $25,000 a month for them, but that wasn't disclosed to the readers of the stories. Now, last week, the Herald's editor-at-large Shane Curry said TVNZ confirmed to him that 7 Sharp's recent My Food Bag piece was indeed sponsored content, and
the support of our advertising partners pays for our journalism. Transparency in advertising is important to us. We mark our integrations with a verbal and visual acknowledgement. Not all our competitors do this.
Now, TVNZ didn't specify which competitors, but it did say, we have a rigorous process to ensure every partnership story we produce on the show is a great editorial fit. But the fit isn't all that great all the time. For instance, 5 years ago when Tip Top marked 80 years in business with a TVNZ-sponsored content deal, breakfast weatherman Sam Wallace delivered forecasts from a Tip Top ice cream truck and tried to force freebies onto people who really didn't want ice cream at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Come here! Enjoy, have a great day.
Honestly, I don't want it.
You don't want to? Please, you have to. This is live on TV, this is embarrassing. Wow, in terms of PR, that just went terribly wrong, didn't it?
And that is a real risk with ill-judged sponsored content. Last week, TVNZ told the Herald's Shane Curry, we think we've got the balance right, but it's not always clear what's an ad and what's not. For example, when My Food Bag tweaked their offering back in 2021, Nadia Lim was also on the 7 Sharp couch talking about it like this.
So I've hauled in some help from our mates at My Food Bag, who might have the fresh start you're looking for.
Over lockdown, some of us have picked up a few unhealthy habits, I think. A lot of baking's been going on.
But this time, there was no explicit declaration of any sponsorship on the air or on the screen. However, host Hilary Barry heartily endorsed the goods of their mates.
And the recipe for that meal is up on our Facebook page now, and you can sign up for your Fresh Start 6-week reset at myfoodbag.co.nz.
And back in 2018, Nadia Lim was feeding breakfast hosts Jack Tame and Hayley Holt from her new cookbook, while also plugging My Food Bag's new budget range.
They're the top-rated bargain box family favourite recipes, yeah.
What is
so
the
great
top-
for people on a budget.
What is the top-rated recipe?
Oh, of all time? Now you've really
Out
got
of
me.
the bargain box out of here, maybe?
It could be something like the nacho pizza, which is in there.
And it wasn't clear then either whether that was news, legit lifestyle content or paid-for sponsored stuff. Now, TVNZ has been at pains to point out that its other news shows are not for hire in this way. One News bulletins and current affairs programs Fair Go, Sunday, Q&A and Te Karere do not take this type of advertising material, TVNZ told the Herald last week. But that doesn't mean that those flagship news and current affairs shows aren't also used for sponsored content. For example, last year, Kiwibank paid for current affairs-like content that was played out during TVNZ's Sunday show, with slots hosted by Sunday reporter John Hudson.
This is Business for Better, brought to you by Kiwibank, proving sustainability and profitability can go hand in hand.
And earlier, TVNZ presenter Jack Tame fronted news-like slots in ad breaks that were targeting small businesses, like this one.
SMEs that are affected by coronavirus should talk to suppliers, distributors and customers so everyone involved in their business has a good sense of how the business is being affected. New Zealand Trade and Enterprise has set up a special advisory panel to assist Kiwi exporters.
Now, those slots really confused some Mediawatch listeners at the time who wondered whether TVNZ's main current affairs interviewer was fronting public information for Business New Zealand, NZTE, the IRD or even maybe the government's official COVID response. But it turned out they were really promotions for another company integrating with TVNZ.
Create and send invoices faster with Xero.
Beautiful.
And lately, other primetime TV integrations with TVNZ have been raising questions. In November last year, 7 Sharp aired this.
Now, with COP27 underway, world leaders are under pressure to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and tackle climate change.
And back home, in a TVNZ climate special, Kiwis can find out more about where their emissions come from and the people creating change.
Stan Walker, one of the most well-known names in the New Zealand music industry.
And after that, singer Stan Walker told 7 Sharp about his passion for the planet and climate action. On Facebook, 7 Sharp said that segment was in partnership with Gen Less, a campaign run by the government's Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, or EECA for short, which encourages all Kiwis to reduce energy consumption and take climate action themselves. And that TVNZ Climate Special, Jeremy Wells mentioned there, was introduced by Mediawatch on TVNZ1 like this back in November.
They say journalism is the first draft of history.
We've got a river running through our workshop.
And we're all starting to see the effects of climate change.
And that special ended an hour later with Mediawatch and her fellow TVNZ reporters chatting to each other about what they learned.
Work more efficiently, and then that's all good for the bottom line in the end.
I love that. So that's a notion of not taking away, actually, you're providing opportunities.
Exactly, and that's what a lot of people said, was that you can look at it and think that it's quite a scary thing, but it's actually a huge opportunity for us all to be pioneers.
Oh, I love that.
And this special TVNZ show was also paid for by EECA.
This is a One Climate special, supported by Gen Less.
And there was plenty more where that came from, EECA's extensive media budget. Back in July, the answer to a parliamentary question from National MP Simeon Brown revealed that TVNZ's climate special was part of a package for which EECA paid TVNZ $300,000. That also covered that Stan Walker interview for 7 Sharp, as well as 5 stories on the One News website and associated social media posts, and 5 interviews across a week integrated onto the Breakfast TV show, featuring EECA climate and energy experts. Now, the response to Simeon Brown's parliamentary question also revealed that ICA paid $200,000 to Stuff for 5 stories and display ads across the Stuff website, some video advertising, and articles in newspaper supplements like Sunday Magazine, Your Weekend, and Life Magazine. And as far back as 2019, Stuff declared that it had partnered with Jen Less when Stuff itself reported on ICA's big spending plans for its media campaigns. Now, in the end, the sum spent on those sponsored content deals with TVNZ and Stuff took up only a small slice of the $4.6 million that ICA spent on advertising and PR last year. And when MP Simeon Brown appeared on the platform this week, he wasn't so much concerned about the state corrupting media with government money or propaganda, but about the wisdom of spending so much public money on advertising.
And I would put it to you, we've got New Zealand On Air, which already has a role to play in terms of supporting content on our televisions and on our radios. That is already there. They can already spend, they already have an allocation of taxpayers' money to make those decisions. They have a process by which they make those decisions. There are more questions that we need to ask to get to the bottom of whether this practice is being used more widely in government, and also around whether or not there were requirements for disclosure as to who was paying the bill for those interviews, particularly on like 7 Sharp or Breakfast Television as well.
Well, the level of disclosure is up to the media companies themselves, according to their own policies. Stuff's sponsored content policy is pretty comprehensive, and it insists that all sponsored content is clearly marked as such. But it's less clear at TVNZ, where, as we heard earlier, those integrations with their programs depend upon a flexible interpretation of what's lifestyle stuff and what's considered to be real news and current affairs, which requires real independence. TVNZ's advertising terms and conditions say that presenters are required to obtain TVNZ sign-off before they appear in ads, and the ads can't be placed within or adjacent to a program in which that TVNZ presenter features. But those Kiwibank-sponsored features about sustainable business, which were hosted by Sunday Show journalist John Hudson, did run in the commercial breaks during the Sunday Show on TVNZ1. And they're also on the Sunday Show site online, along with the actual journalism from the program. Likewise, Jack Tame's Zero-sponsored Business Insight videos aired in the ads in the breaks between TVNZ news programs, and they're also hosted on the One News social media pages, along with real news and journalism items. Indeed, TVNZ has an in-house advertising unit called Black Sand, which creates the content for these sorts of campaigns, and its own website features the 7 Sharp show as an avenue for exposure. Now, the principles of the watchdog, the Media Council, which covers online news content, say this:
where a story is enabled by sponsorship, gift or financial inducement, that should be declared.
Now, on TVNZ shows, a sponsor's name is usually attached to such items, sometimes with an explicit "brought to you by" tagline. Though, as we've heard, some of the same commercial companies like My Food Bag can also get on-air exposure without that. And on the matter of what's an ad and what's not in our media, the Advertising Standards Authority says this:
the public is entitled to know when it is reading, listening to or viewing advertorial, because it will regard differently information generated by an advertiser in its own favour, and information generated by the media in its own right, which can be expected to have a quality of independence.
And the Advertising Standards Authority also suggests a number of tests to determine which is which, and one of those is the item independent of control in any measure by the advertiser? This week we sent questions to TVNZ's Commercial Director Jodie O'Donnell, who oversees partnerships with sponsors like ICA who want input into TVNZ's on-air content. And while she declined to be interviewed, TVNZ sent us some responses which were pretty similar to the ones they sent to other media who've been asking questions about all this. TVNZ said it's happy with the way the ICA partnership went in 2022, but is now adding additional sponsors' logos to breakfast show TV items in future and is, quote, always looking at how we can further strengthen transparency around paid partnering. And when asked if participation of TVNZ news journalists is specified in such partnership agreements, like the ones TVNZ reached with ICA and KiwiBank, TVNZ said no, it retains editorial control over how those partnerships are implemented, meaning presumably they are okay with their journalists, including senior news and current affairs ones, appearing in news-like content that's paid for by advertisers and sponsors. Well, as we've heard, sponsored content isn't new, and different outlets have different policies and practices for dealing with it and for flagging it for their audience. And while commercial media organisations really need revenue these days from wherever they can get it, they also need to keep full control of sponsored content. Because the other thing that's in short supply these days is public trust in our media, and that's a different kind of currency that they also need in reserve. Another group with an interest in how all this plays out are the marketing and advertising agencies, which companies and agencies of state engage to create and run their costly campaigns in the media, whether that's to persuade people to be more climate conscious or to buy a particular kind of burger. And here on Mediawatch, we don't often talk about them or hardly ever to them. But as TVNZ pointed out earlier, the money that commercial campaigns bring in also pays for the journalism and the programs that commercial media companies offer us all. This week, 28 of New Zealand's independent media agencies gathered at NZME's headquarters in Auckland to launch their own umbrella body, Independent Media Agencies New Zealand. New Zealand Herald Editor-at-Large Shane Curry chaired a panel discussion about the state of play with top executives from NZME, Stuff, TVNZ and a local rep from TikTok. And listening in was the chair of the new body, Alex Radford, who's also the chair and co-founder of the Auckland-based media agency D3.
Some creative agencies are obviously the ones that make the TV commercials and the newspaper ads. They started splitting off their media departments because there was more complexity to buying media into separate businesses. Fast forward that 50, 60 years, there's now a number of media agencies, both owned by 5 of the big international conglomerates, so the likes of Omnicom and Publicis, Publicis who own Saatchi's. There are 17 different brands that sit under those 5 big global organisations, working with the likes of TVNZ and as well as the Googles, the Stuffs, the Metas. So whereas the advertising agencies do the creative side of things, so they make the ads, and then we work with the audience information and the objectives of the clients, and decide what channels and programs sometimes to put the advertisement on. We do purposefully sit sort of under the radar. Our sort of main aim is really to explain to clients, to government, and also for those organisations and businesses that don't use an agency to buy their media, to understand that you can work with an independent agency, and that's really different to the 5 big holdcos or the conglomerates that operate here in New Zealand, and a lot of that money that they use will then go offshore.
Well, in a statement that was put out after your launch this week, we have a desire, this is quoting you, I think, we have a desire to safeguard and support the Fifth Estate and support the local media sector. But I mean, really, in the end, you're in marketing stuff for commercial clients, right? Do you really care that much about the health of media and news and things like that?
Yeah, 100%. I think that we are in a world of globalization, of the likes of Google and Facebook and TikTok. But I certainly don't want to live in a world, and I think I can talk for all of the other members, where the only place you can get your news is Facebook, or the only information around what's happening in Taranaki is from Google. I think that it's part of our remit is to be able to work with the local media here in New Zealand to keep that Fourth Estate valid and vibrant. I think it's incredibly important for all the people that live in this country.
In the end, do your clients care too much about that? If they can reach the right sort of people by going through a local community Facebook group or something like that, the media spend might not be going to a media company that also produces journalism that in the end helps out create a thriving democracy and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think they do. And 2 elements of that. One is focusing on local news outlets and media businesses and how we can support them. And the whole idea of IMANS is actually sitting down with the likes of NZME and Stuff, TVNZ, and saying, how can we work together to make our industry more vibrant? Because if we don't, the machines are what runs Google, Facebook, and so it's in everybody's interests to ensure that we do have that vibrant media landscape. You know, you could spend, say, $200,000 on a global media platform, or you could spend that same amount of money on a local publisher. You're going to reach the same audience. It's going to cost about the same. We should be using, you know, the local publisher as a default, not simply just give it over to the global business because it's easier.
A similar organisation set up in Australia, I think 3 years ago, that, according to your statement here, says has proven to be a strong advocate for, and this is interesting, fairer public sector procurement practices. So is this also about local creative agencies can get a slice of the government, the public sector, you know, communications and information budgets, you know, such as that one by the Energy Efficiency Conservation Authority, their budget that's been in the news this week? You want a slice of that effectively? Well,
yeah, and I think, again, what we want is a fair slice. They have rules and regulations built into government procurement to ensure that independent agencies do have the opportunity to pitch for that business on a level playing field to the big international companies. One
such sort of public information campaign, the Energy Efficiency Conservation Authority, buying $500,000 worth of space on TVNZ and Stuff for a campaign. This was actually in 2022.
Yeah, sponsored content and getting messages across in what we would call a native fashion has been part of the media landscape for a very long time. New Zealand is very high up in public spending in terms of advertising across the world. You know, there's a lot of communication that's done by government. Whether or not that's right, I don't think it's my place to say. What we do know is that audiences are hard to find these days. You know, if you're trying to talk to a younger audience, you know, putting TV ads or ads on the radio are not as effective as they used to be. So they do need to be finding different ways of being able to communicate that message and be a bit more innovative in the way that they do it. You know, we do need to get those messages across, whether or not they do it via native or paid advertising. That's sort of really, you know, their prerogative.
But when it's a public campaign, public money being spent, is that something all marketers are going to have to be aware of now, that there will be increasing challenge from people that this is somehow corrupting the media or bribing the media with public money?
I mean, I think we've seen these sort of campaigns happening all over the world. And, you know, in the UK, the government is using, you know, ITV, Channel 4, newspapers to get those messages across in a less of an advertising format. But I think it's really for the government to start thinking around whether or not, you know, spending that kind of money on those messages are the right thing to do. Our job is to, you know, take that brief, talk to the media, make sure that it sits within the parameters of what we can do legally, and then make that decision.
But integration is nothing new, right? I can think of instances going way back 10, 15 years where news and news-like programs like Breakfast TV have had clearly sponsored stuff running outside of the commercial breaks. Nothing new about that. But is that something that's attractive to your clients? Is it something you recommend to say, you know, actually you get better cut through if you try and place something within a program? You know, someone in a news type show talking about the product?
We've got to be really careful. You have to be thinking around the most vulnerable and those people who aren't necessarily as au fait about the difference between what is sponsored content, what is advertising, and what is content. Anything which is not transparent, that it is clearly paid for advertising, in my opinion, is problematic, especially when it is sat within news or news-like content. And I think that it's the responsibility of the broadcasters to ensure that, you know, that their listeners, readers or viewers are protected and understand that what they're watching is being paid for by a commercial organisation.
So you think it's problematic because it undermines the news credentials of the particular broadcaster that's hosting it? I think
what it does, it undermines the transparency. And it's not difficult to fix. It's every month in, say, Kia Ora magazine, there's clearly advertorial sponsored content. It just needs to be clearly labelled, very clearly distinguishable between what was content and what was advertising.
Yeah, so when we see this nowadays, it's often termed as a kind of partnership. In fact, there'll be press releases that go out. So that ECA stuff, for example, was announced by both parties, and that resulted in that climate special on RNZ1 and a bunch of other content, interviews in the breakfast show and so on. So are we going to see more of this then? So brands or agencies that have money to spend will actually say, we're forming a partnership, and that will explain why such content like this starts appearing not outside of traditional commercial breaks where people know what they're watching.
I think a partnership is, in my mind, where no money has changed hands. There is a value exchange. I think a partnership where there is a commercial interest from one party is advertising. And you can wrap it up any way you want, but the reality is that as I said, for the protection of those readers and viewers and listeners, you need to make it very clear what is advertising and what isn't. I think it's the responsibility of the broadcasters, agencies and clients. We want to be able to put our products and services in the place where most people will be able to buy those products or services. So it's the responsibility of the ASA and broadcasters to be very clear around what is okay and what not, and I think that pragmatic common sense is key to that as well.
Some of these partnerships result in identifiable news journalists. Like, for example, there was a TVNZ KiwiBank partnership attached to their Sunday show, John Hudson from the show presenting slots that ran in the commercial break about sustainable business supported by KiwiBank. So that's news-like content with an identifiable news face in it. They've also used Jack Tame for other stuff that's backed by companies, that it somehow gives heft to the message if it's a news name that they know and trust.
Definitely. I mean, that's why they use them, that it gives credence to their message and it adds, as you said, heft and weight to the message they're trying to put through. As I said, I'm originally from the UK, and there are very, very clear guidelines at Ofcom and ASA that you can't use talent from a programme in any of the advertising breaks within, I think it's an hour each side. So there are very clear regulations around what you can and can't do with talent.
Yes, so Ofcom's the UK kind of overall media watchdog, wasn't it? Right across different forms of media, I think, that upholds the agreed standards, but also sort of considers complaints where they arise. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. There's Ofcom, and then there's the ASA and the CAP, and ASA looks after advertising, and BSA, apologies, it looks after broadcast standards. So you've got Broadcast Standards Authority, Advertising Standards Authority, and they are either close or underneath Ofcom. The difference being that Ofcom can actually fine and stop people advertising, which I don't think they can do in New Zealand. But the regulations are much tighter in the UK around what you can and can't do. And a lot of that sits actually because there was a lot of time back in the 90s when people were trying to put like bottles of Smirnoff in the pub in Coronation Street. People didn't like that.
Yeah, indeed. Actually, moving away from that, there is another initiative to make the ad business carbon neutral called Ad Net Zero. I don't know if Ironmans has a position or is part of that. TVNZ, I think, hosted the launch of that recently. Is there a bit of a contradiction there if the ad business exists to persuade us to consume more of certain things? Is that consistent with a message about sustainability and carbon neutrality?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and it's a conversation ongoing within the industry here in New Zealand. Advertising in its purest form is around getting consumers to consume more. But what we can do is start thinking about how are we doing this in the most sustainable way? As everything is being digitised, we're thinking that because it's not physical, that we're not creating carbon emissions. But the reality is that technology which serves ads into websites creates huge amounts of energy. So one of the statistics which blows my mind is that 1 million ad impressions, which sounds a lot but really isn't. 1 million ad impressions being served onto websites is the equivalent of a return flight from London to Boston in terms of the emissions being given out. If you think about how many billions and billions of impressions are being served on a daily basis, we do have a problem. We are creating huge amounts of energy to create these websites and digital assets.
Well, you also said an interesting thing earlier, Alex, where you said, look, if we leave it to the machines, I think as you put it, meaning I guess the algorithms and the digital technology, you will end up with people just seeking the lowest cost for eyeballs, per thousand, per money they have to spend and all of that. And that's not good for local agencies like yours or, the health and sustainability of our media, which need revenue.
Programmatic has been, it's both brilliant and sort of incredibly bad at the same time. And I think that as an industry, we've got addicted to the ability of being able to do everything at speed, being able to serve millions of ad impressions to reach as many people as we possibly can. And I think now we are starting to understand, and it's through education, through clients and businesses and government understanding that there can be a better way. Being able to serve, as I said, like billions of ad impressions across thousands of different networks, reaching the same people, when actually you go, wouldn't it be easier if we just sat down and had a conversation with the guys at the Herald or the guys at Mediaworks or whomever to solve this problem without needing all of this technology? And I think that's where we're starting to get to, is why are we pushing so much into the technology space when in fact it is causing issues with the environment and it's also causing issues with local media health?
And finally, Alex, you had that launch event this week where you did meet with the big names and well-known names in New Zealand news media. Do you get the sense that they're receptive with what you want to do? The mutual interests that your members have are similar to the ones that they have as local providers of news and media?
We've sat down with everybody from all of the key local publishers, as well as the global players, and have had conversations around how we can support them and then how we can and how mutually they can support us. But largely, they want a healthy. They want a place where in New Zealand where journalists are producing really good content, that people are reading or watching or listening to really good content, and that's what I think New Zealanders want. It's unlikely that anybody who is an avid listener to the radio or the TV really wants to live in a Netflix world where the only way you can get content is from streaming services or global podcasts. So I think everybody is very much aligned. It's now just about making it happen. Organisations like IMANS, obviously we're all businesses, but we've been formed to really grow the understanding of the independent media agency, working with those publishers to ensure that they do have a long and successful future.
That was Alex Radford, inaugural chair of Independent Media Agencies New Zealand, a new umbrella group representing the mutual interests of local and New Zealand-owned advertising and marketing agencies. And he's also the chair and co-founder of the Auckland-based agency D3.